Let me tell you about the night a man stood in front of a room full of millionaires and made them cry. His name was Marcus, and he wasn't supposed to be there. He didn't have the right suit, didn't have the right education, didn't have a trust fund or a business degree. What he had was a daughter named Zoe, a broken sink he'd fixed with duct tape, and a story that every single person in that room had forgotten or never knew. This is the story of how one speech, one honest, trembling, 5-minute speech, changed everything. Not just for Marcus, not just for Victoria Sterling, the billionaire who invited him, but for every parent who's ever worked 2 jobs and still felt like they were failing. Every father who's smiled through the exhaustion. Every person who's been invisible their whole life, until someone finally sees them. This isn't a fairy tale, but it might just be something better. It's real. Let me tell you about the night a man stood in front of a room full of millionaires and made them cry. His name was Marcus, and he wasn't supposed to be there. He didn't have the right suit, didn't have the right education, didn't have a trust fund or a business degree. What he had was a daughter named Zoe, a broken sink he'd fixed with duct tape, and a story that every single person in that room had forgotten or never knew. This is the story of how one speech, one honest, trembling, 5-minute speech, changed everything. Not just for Marcus, not just for Victoria Sterling, the billionaire who invited him, but for every parent who's ever worked 2 jobs and still felt like they were failing. Every father who's smiled through the exhaustion. Every person who's been invisible their whole life, until someone finally sees them. This isn't a fairy tale, but it might just be something better. It's real. Marcus stood backstage, and his hands wouldn't stop shaking. The suit he wore didn't fit quite right. It was borrowed. Well, not borrowed exactly. Victoria had sent it to his apartment 3 days ago with a note that said, "You'll need this. Don't argue." He hadn't argued. He couldn't afford to. The fabric felt strange against his skin. Too smooth. Too expensive. Like it belonged to someone else's life. Through the curtain, he could hear the low hum of conversation. Hundreds of voices. Clinking glasses. Laughter that sounded easy, effortless. The kind of laughter that came from people who'd never worried about whether the electricity would get shut off. Who'd never chosen between buying groceries or paying for medicine. People who lived in a different world. And Marcus? He was about to walk into that world and tell them the truth. His daughter Zoe sat beside him on a folding chair, swinging her legs. She wore a dress Victoria had also sent, soft blue with little white flowers. Zoe had twirled in it for 10 minutes straight when it arrived, laughing so hard she'd gotten dizzy. Now she looked up at him with those big brown eyes that looked just like her mother's. "You okay, Daddy?" Marcus swallowed hard. "Yeah, baby. Just thinking. Are you nervous?" "A little." She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were so small, so warm. "It's okay to be nervous," she said seriously. "Mrs. Chen says being nervous means you care." Mrs. Chen was Zoe's 2nd-grade teacher. A woman who saw more than most people did. Who noticed when a kid came to school hungry. Who kept granola bars in her desk drawer and never made a big deal about handing them out. Marcus smiled. "Mrs. Chen is smart." "I know," Zoe said. Then she squeezed his hand. "You're gonna do great, Daddy." "I know you are." God, he hoped so. Let me tell you who Marcus really was. He wasn't a public speaker. Wasn't a businessman. Wasn't anyone important by the world's standards. He was a maintenance worker at an apartment complex on the east side of the city. The kind of job where you showed up at 6 in the morning and left when the work was done, which was never. Leaky faucets. Broken heaters. Clogged drains. Peeling paint. He fixed them all. He was good at it too. Had a knack for figuring out how things worked. How to patch. How to hold things together just a little bit longer. That's what his whole life had been, really. Patching. Holding together. He'd raised Zoe alone since she was 2. Her mother, sweet, broken, beautiful Sarah, had left one morning and never come back. No note, No goodbye. Just gone. It nearly destroyed him. But he had Zoe. And Zoe needed him. So he got up. He went to work. He made breakfast. He braided her hair. Badly at first, better over time. He read her bedtime stories. He showed up to every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every moment that mattered. He was tired. God, he was so tired. But he smiled. He tucked her in at night. He told her she was safe, she was loved, she was going to be okay. Even when he wasn't sure, he believed it himself. The neighborhood they lived in wasn't much. Small apartments packed tight. Chain-link fences. Cracked sidewalks. But it was home. And the people there, they were family. Mrs. Rodriguez downstairs watched Zoe when Marcus had to work late. Mr. Thompson across the hall taught Zoe how to play chess. The teenage kid next door, Jamal, walked Zoe to the bus stop every morning because Marcus's shift started too early. They looked out for each other. They shared what little they had. They survived together. That's what people do when the world forgets about them. They remember each other. So how did Marcus end up here? In a borrowed suit, about to speak at a charity gala for the city's wealthiest elite? It started with a storm. 3 months ago, the worst storm the city had seen in decades rolled through. Rain came down like anger. Wind tore roofs off buildings. Power lines snapped. Trees fell. Marcus's neighborhood got hit hard. Flooding in the streets. Broken windows. Families stuck in the dark with no heat, no power, no help coming. And while the rich part of town got their repairs done in hours, Marcus's neighborhood, they waited. And waited. Victoria Sterling owned half the buildings in the city, including the complex where Marcus worked. And when he finally got her on the phone, after days of trying, days of desperation, she'd brushed him off. "These things take time," she'd said coolly. "File a report." Something inside Marcus snapped. He drove across town, showed up at her office building, walked past security, argued past security, and found her in a glass-walled conference room. And he yelled. He yelled about the families sleeping in wet apartments, about the kids getting sick, about the broken promises and the endless waiting. He yelled until his voice cracked, until security grabbed his arms, until Victoria, stunned, silent, finally held up a hand and told them to let him go. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Show me." Victoria Sterling wasn't what Marcus expected. She was sharp, brilliant, cold in the way that powerful people often are, like she'd built walls so high, nothing could touch her. But when she came to his neighborhood that day, something shifted. She saw the flooded apartments, the mold creeping up the walls, the families crowded into dry spaces because they had nowhere else to go. She met Mrs. Rodriguez, who offered her tea even though she barely had enough for herself. She met Zoe, who asked her politely if she was a princess. Victoria had laughed. An actual, genuine laugh. "No, sweetheart. I'm not a princess." "You look like one," Zoe said. From that day forward, things changed. Victoria didn't just send a repair crew. She came back. Again. And again. She started asking questions. Listening. Learning. And then one day, she told Marcus about the fund. "I want to create something," she said. "Something that actually helps people like the families in your neighborhood. But I don't know how. I don't know what they need." Marcus frowned. "So ask them." "I'm asking you." That's how the partnership began. Marcus and Victoria, two people from completely different worlds, working together to build something real. A fund that would help working parents, single fathers, families just trying to survive. And tonight was the launch. The big event. The moment where Victoria would announce the fund to the world. She'd asked Marcus to speak. "Tell them what it's like," she'd said. "Tell them the truth. That's all I need from you." Now Marcus stood in the wings, watching the crowd through a gap in the curtain. They were beautiful people. Designer dresses. Perfect hair. Champagne glasses catching the light. They looked like they belonged in magazines. And Marcus? He looked like a man who'd just gotten off a double shift. Victoria appeared beside him suddenly, elegant in a black gown that probably cost more than his rent. "You ready?" she asked. "No." She smiled. Soft, almost kind. "Good. That means you're not faking it. What if I mess up?" "You won't." "What if they don't care?" Victoria turned to face him fully. Her eyes were bright, intense. "Marcus," she said quietly, "you made me care. And I'm the hardest person in that room to reach. If you can get through to me, you can get through to anyone." Before he could respond, someone called his name. It was time. Marcus walked onto that stage, and the world went silent. Not actually silent. The crowd kept talking. But in his head, everything went quiet except for the sound of his own heartbeat. He reached the microphone, looked out at the sea of faces. Rich, comfortable, distant. For a second, he thought about running. Then he saw Zoe, peeking out from backstage, giving him a thumbs up. He took a breath, and he spoke. "This fund isn't about me." His voice cracked a little. He cleared his throat. "It's about every parent who works themselves tired but still tucks their child in at night with a smile. It's about every dad who fixes what he can at home and prays that tomorrow won't break him. It's about people like us, people who fight quietly, who love loudly, who wake up every morning and try again even when life keeps saying no." The room started to quiet. People turned to look. Marcus kept going. "I know most of you in this room don't know what that's like. And that's okay. I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to tell you, to remind you, that there are families in this city who are one bad day away from losing everything. One broken car. One missed paycheck. One sick kid." His hands gripped the podium. "And the thing is, we don't ask for much. We don't want handouts. We just want a chance. A fighting chance. We want to know that if we fall, someone will help us get back up." He paused, looked down at his hands. "If this fund helps even one father keep his lights on, if it helps one kid go to school with clean clothes and a full stomach, then everything I've ever struggled through was worth it." The silence was complete now. Not a cough. Not a whisper. Then, slowly, someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole room erupted. The applause wasn't polite. It was thunderous. It was real. Zoe jumped from her seat backstage, clapping her small hands, her eyes shining with pride so bright it could have lit the whole building. And Victoria, cool, controlled Victoria Sterling, watched Marcus with something rare in her gaze. Something soft. Something warm. Something like respect. And maybe, something deeper she didn't dare name. The applause wouldn't stop. Marcus stood there, frozen at the podium, watching hundreds of people rise to their feet. The sound crashed over him like a wave, loud, overwhelming, impossible to process. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who just ripped his chest open and shown strangers his heart. And somehow, they'd held it gently. Victoria stepped beside him on stage, her hand briefly touching his arm, a gesture so small, so quick, that most people wouldn't have noticed. But Marcus did. He felt the warmth of it. The steadiness. She leaned toward the microphone, her voice clear and commanding even through emotion. "Thank you, Marcus," she said. Then she turned to the crowd. "This is why we're here tonight. Not for speeches written by PR teams. Not for tax breaks or photo opportunities. We're here because real change starts with real stories. With real people." She paused, letting the moment settle. The Marcus Reed Foundation for Working Families launches tonight. And every dollar raised will go directly to helping parents like Marcus. Parents who work hard, love harder, and deserve our support. More applause. More cameras flashing. Marcus barely heard it. His legs felt weak. His heart hammered so hard he thought everyone in the room could hear it. Then he felt a tug on his jacket. Zoe. She'd snuck onto the stage, her little dress swishing as she wrapped her arms around his waist. She didn't care about the cameras or the crowd or the rules about staying backstage. She just wanted her dad. Marcus bent down and scooped her up, holding her tight. She buried her face in his neck. "You did it, Daddy," she whispered. "You were so brave." His eyes burned. He blinked hard, trying not to cry in front of all these people. "You make me brave, baby girl," he whispered back. The crowd loved it. The moment was perfect. Genuine, unscripted, beautiful. But Marcus wasn't thinking about the crowd anymore. He was thinking about how small Zoe felt in his arms. How big the world was. How impossibly lucky he was to be her father. The event ended in chaos. Reporters swarmed. People wanted interviews, handshakes, photos. Business cards were pressed into Marcus's hands faster than he could process names or faces. "We'd love to feature you on our morning show. I run a non-profit that aligns perfectly with this mission. Can we schedule a follow-up meeting?" Victoria appeared like a force of nature, cutting through the crowd with a kind of authority that made people step aside without realizing they were doing it. "Mr. Reed needs a moment," she said smoothly. "Please direct all inquiries to my assistant." "Thank you." She guided Marcus and Zoe through a side door, away from the noise, into a quiet hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than Marcus's entire apartment building. Zoe yawned, leaning heavily against Marcus's side. "Someone's tired," Victoria observed, her voice softer than Marcus had ever heard it. "It's past her bedtime by about 3 hours," Marcus admitted. "There's a lounge down the hall. She can rest there while we wrap things up." "We?" Victoria's assistant, a woman named Claire who seemed to anticipate Victoria's needs before Victoria even knew she had them, appeared with a knowing look. "I'll take Zoe," Claire offered kindly. "There's a couch, some blankets, and I may or may not have chocolate chip cookies in my bag." Zoe perked up immediately. "Cookies?" Marcus hesitated, but Claire had kind eyes. And Zoe was already reaching for her hand. "I'll be right there, baby. Just a few minutes, okay?" "Okay, Daddy." He watched them disappear around the corner, then turned to find Victoria studying him. "You okay?" she asked. Marcus laughed, a tired, slightly hysterical sound. "Ask me again when my heart stops racing." Victoria smiled. Actually smiled. Not the polite, professional smile she wore like armor. A real one. "You did good, Marcus." "So did you," he said. "This fund, it'll change lives." "That's the idea." They stood there for a moment, the silence stretching between them. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with something unspoken. Victoria had been called a lot of things in her life. Brilliant, ruthless, cold, ambitious, a shark in heels, the ice queen of real estate. She'd built an empire from nothing, turned her father's failing construction company into a billion-dollar enterprise. She didn't apologize for her success, didn't soften herself to make other people comfortable. She'd learned early that the world didn't reward softness. It rewarded strength. But tonight, watching Marcus speak, watching him shake and stumble and bare his soul anyway, something inside her had cracked. She'd spent years building walls, keeping people at a distance. Relationships were transactions. Partnerships were strategic. Emotions were liabilities. And then Marcus Reed had stormed into her office 3 months ago, furious and desperate and so completely unafraid of her, and those walls had started to crumble. She'd tried to ignore it, tried to keep things professional. But somewhere between the flooded apartments and the late-night planning sessions, between watching him fix a sink with duct tape and listening to him talk about his daughter with so much love it hurt to hear, somewhere in all of that, Victoria had started to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Something dangerous. Something real. "Marcus," Victoria said quietly, breaking the silence. "There's something else I want to talk to you about." He raised an eyebrow, that slight smirk playing at his lips. "Is this the part where you tell me you're buying the whole neighborhood?" "No." She smiled despite herself. "This is the part where I tell you, I'd like to know you better. Not the man from the storm. Not the man who yelled at me. Not the man on stage tonight. She swallowed, and it took more courage than any business deal ever had. I want to know you. The real you. Marcus blinked, stunned. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Just stared at her like he was trying to figure out if he'd heard correctly. Victoria. He started, then stopped. I know this is complicated, she said quickly. I know we come from different worlds. I know people will talk. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. Then why? Because I can't stop thinking about you. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria Sterling, the woman who negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, who fired executives before breakfast, who never, ever showed weakness, was standing in a hallway confessing feelings like a nervous teenager. And Marcus? Marcus looked like he'd been hit by lightning. You can't stop thinking about me, he repeated slowly. No. And believe me, I've tried. A laugh burst out of him. Surprised, disbelieving. You've tried not to think about me? You have no idea how inconvenient you are. Inconvenient. Extremely. He shook his head, running a hand over his face. Victoria, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now. I wanted you to know. I wanted to be honest. Because you've been honest with me since the day we met, even when it wasn't easy. Especially when it wasn't easy. She took a breath. You've changed the way I see things, Marcus. Changed the way I see people. See myself. And I don't want to go back to who I was before I met you. Marcus's mind was racing. Victoria Sterling was standing in front of him, vulnerable in a way he'd never seen, telling him she had feelings for him. Him. Marcus Reed. Single dad. Maintenance worker. Guy who'd yelled at her in her own office. It didn't make sense. Except, maybe it did. Because over the past 3 months, he'd seen sides of Victoria that he suspected few people ever saw. The way she listened when people talked, really listened. The way she remembered details. Mrs. Rodriguez's bad hip. Mr. Thompson's love of old jazz. Zoe's favorite color. The way she'd sat on his worn-out couch in his tiny apartment, drinking instant coffee without complaint, asking him questions about what families really needed. The way she'd looked at Zoe like she was something precious. The way she'd pushed him to speak tonight, believing he had something worth saying when he didn't believe it himself. Can I ask you something? Marcus said quietly. Anything. Why me? You could have anyone. People with money, education, connections. I don't want anyone, Victoria interrupted. I want you. But why? She considered the question seriously. When she answered, her voice was soft but certain. Because you're real. Because you care about people, not what they can do for you, but just people. Because you love your daughter with everything you have. Because you fixed a sink with duct tape and somehow made it work for 3 months. Because you weren't afraid to yell at me when I needed to be yelled at. She stepped closer. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe. Like I don't have to be Victoria Sterling, billionaire CEO. I can just be Victoria. And I haven't felt that way in a very long time. Marcus's heart was doing something complicated in his chest. Something that felt like hope and terror mixed together. I have a daughter, he said. Zoe comes first. Always. That's not negotiable. I know. I wouldn't want it any other way. I work long hours. I'm tired a lot. I can't take you to fancy restaurants or buy you expensive things. Marcus. Victoria's voice was gentle. I can buy my own restaurants. That's not what this is about. She met his eyes, steady and sure. It's about finding someone who sees you, really sees you, and wanting to see them back. They stood there in that hallway, 2 people from impossibly different worlds, separated by money and status and every logical reason why this shouldn't work. But logic wasn't what Marcus felt in that moment. What he felt was the memory of Victoria sitting with Mrs. Rodriguez, listening to stories about the old neighborhood. The way she'd knelt down to talk to Zoe at eye level. The fierce look in her eyes when she'd promised to help his community and then actually followed through. What he felt was 3 months of late-night phone calls about the fund. Of Victoria asking his opinion, treating his ideas like they mattered. Of small moments, her laugh when he made a dumb joke, the way she'd fallen asleep on his couch once after a long planning session, looking more peaceful than he'd ever seen her. What he felt was terrifying and wonderful and completely unexpected. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Me too. What if this doesn't work?" "What if it does?" Marcus smiled despite himself. "You always have an answer for everything, don't you? One of my more annoying qualities." "It's not annoying." "No. No." He took a breath. Took the leap. "I'd like to get to know you too, Victoria. The real you. Not the CEO. Not the woman who owns half the city. Just you." The smile that broke across her face was worth every risk. They didn't kiss. Not that night. It wasn't that kind of moment. It was quieter than that. More important than that. It was two people being honest. Being brave. Being willing to try something that scared them both. Marcus collected Zoe from the lounge. She'd fallen asleep with cookie crumbs on her chin, and Victoria walked them to his car. A beat-up Honda that Marcus kept running through sheer determination and YouTube tutorials. "Quite a chariot," Victoria teased gently. "She's got character." "Is that what we're calling it?" Marcus settled Zoe into her booster seat, brushing hair from her face. Then he turned to Victoria. "Thank you," he said. "For tonight. For all of it. For seeing something in me worth believing in. Thank you for letting me see it." They stood there in the parking garage, the sound of the city distant above them. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked. Victoria smiled. "I was thinking, maybe dinner? Somewhere quiet. Just the two of us." "Are you asking me on a date, Ms. Sterling?" "I believe I am, Mr. Reed." "Then yes. I'd like that." "Good." She hesitated, then added, "And Marcus?" "Bring Zoe next time. I want to know both of you. As a family." Something in Marcus's chest expanded, warm and bright. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yeah, we'd like that too." Marcus drove home through the sleeping city, Zoe snoring softly in the back seat. The streetlights painted everything in orange and shadow. The radio played quietly. The world felt different somehow. Bigger. Full of possibility. When he carried Zoe upstairs to their apartment, the same small, worn apartment they'd always lived in, everything looked the same. But Marcus felt changed. He tucked Zoe into bed, kissed her forehead, turned on her nightlight. "Love you, Daddy," she mumbled, half asleep. "Love you too, baby girl. More than anything." He stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe, thinking about everything that had happened. Everything that might happen. The fund would help people. Real people, real families. Kids like Zoe would go to school with full bellies. Parents like him would have a safety net when life got hard. And Victoria. Victoria was a mystery still unfolding. A chance at something he'd stopped believing he could have. Love didn't always announce itself with fireworks and grand gestures, Marcus realized. Sometimes it arrived quietly. In a storm. In an argument. In the slow process of two people learning to see each other. Sometimes it arrived when you least expected it. And maybe, just maybe, that's when it mattered most. Marcus walked to his window, looked out at his neighborhood. The chain-link fences. The cracked sidewalks. The apartments with lights still burning because people were working night shifts or soothing crying babies or fixing one more broken thing before they could rest. His people. His community. Tomorrow, he'd go back to work. Fix the leaks, patch the walls, hold things together. But now there was something else too. A fund that would actually help. A partnership that meant something. And a woman who'd seen past every reason why they shouldn't work and asked the only question that mattered. What if we do? Marcus smiled to himself in the darkness. Yeah, he thought. What if we do? Outside, the city hummed its endless song. Inside, Marcus Reed, father, fighter, the man behind the microphone, allowed himself to hope. And hope, it turned out, was the bravest thing of all. Because some stories aren't about escaping your life. They're about someone seeing your life, really seeing it, and saying, this matters. You matter. And sometimes that's the only miracle you need.